So what is DAX we discussed, and in the DAX what kind of new information we will create we discussed, columns, measures and tables, and we are understanding when to create the columns. I said that we can create the columns in Power Query as well as Power Pivot. So when you create the columns in the Power Query, what advantages you have, when you create the columns in the Power Pivot, what advantages we have, we discussed. And then we'll discuss when to create the measures now. So we are done with when to create columns. The second one, or the second new information we'll create is measures, when to create measures. So when to create measures is the question. So columns can be created in Power Query as well as Power Pivot. Columns can be created in Power Query as well as Power Pivot, but measures can be created only in Power Pivot case. Measures, it is not possible to create in what? Power Query. Measures can be created only in the Power Pivot. So when you need to create the measures is whenever we need aggregate results, whenever we need aggregate results, whenever we need aggregate results, comma, whenever we need aggregate results, or whenever we need percentages, whenever we need to calculate, whenever we need to calculate aggregate results or percentages, then we need to create a measure case. Whenever we need to calculate aggregate results or percentages, we need to create a measure. So in simple understanding, when you have a table, in the table for every row you need one value, then you need to create a new column. So in the Power Pivot I have one table. For every row I need a calculation. For that I need to create a new column. Let me go and click on Excel, desktop backup, source files. Let me even sample superstore, click on open, orders table, click on load. So here, when in a table for every row, if you need one calculation, we need to create the new column. So sometimes to show the output in the report, we need to create a value for every row in the table. Whenever you need to create a value for every row in the table, we'll create the new columns. So when we need to create the measures is, so I said that measures will be created to get the aggregate results, complex aggregate results, or measures will be created using to calculate percentages. Whenever we need to calculate aggregate results or percentages, we need to create measures. In simple terms, for group of rows, if you need to derive a value, then you need to create a measure, guys. For group of rows, if you need to derive a value for a group of rows, when there is any requirement where you need to derive a value for group of rows, for every row when I need to derive a value, new column. For group of rows, if I need to derive some value, I can go and create a measure. For group of rows, if I need to derive a value, I need to create a measure case. If I need to derive a value, I need to create a measure. So aggregations means on group of rows we need some value. Aggregations always works on group of rows. On group of rows, if you need a value, you need to create a measure. Take an example. My client is asking to show what is the sum of salary we are paying for all the employees. sum of salary we are paying for all the employees. So that means for all the 15 rows, I want to show one value, sum of sales. For all the 15 rows, when you want to show one value, you need to create what? From group of rows, when you need a value, I said that you need to create a measure, guys. You need to create a measure. Whenever I need to derive some aggregate results or percentages, we need to create measure. So sometimes I want to get sum of salary. To get sum of salary, I said that go to data view and select the table where you need to create the measure and go to the table tools, click on new measure. So whenever we need to create a measure, I need to click on new measure, guys. Just click on new measure. Just click on new measure and give the measure name as what? Sum of sales. So you can give the measure name sales, sorry, sum of salaries, sum of salary. I want to derive sum of salary here. This is the measure name, the new information which I am creating. After equal to, I need to write the formula. I need to sum all the values in this column. When you want to sum all the values in one column, there is a function called sum function. It's a Dax function. We need to use it. Sum is a Dax function. To the sum function, you need to pass one column. To the sum function, what you can pass? You can pass any column here. When you pass any column, what it will do? It will add all the numbers in the column. The sum function will add all the numbers in the column. To the sum function, let me pass the salary column. When I pass the salary column, it will create a measure. Look at this, sum of salary, create a measure. So, and if you want to see that measure value, I can just go and take one visual here. I can go and take one visual. I can drag this sum of salary column and it will show 39K is the sum of salary we are paying for all the employees. 39K is the sum of salary we are paying for all the employees. Now, the same results what I am showing here, I can even show without writing the formula. Now you are showing 39K is the sum of salary you are paying. For this, you don't want to do hangama here. You don't want to write any formula, you can get it. How can we get it? The same 39K I want to see. How can I get it without this formula? How can I get it?
Unmuted.
Huh?
Drag it to the visuals.
Just take one card visual. Just go and drag the salary column on top of visual. When you drag it, by default, it will do what? Sum. So both are measures only. Even this is a measure, guys. Even this is a measure. This measure we call it as implicit measure. This measure we call it as explicit measure. So types of measures. We have two types of measures, guys. Types of measures. Types of measures. So we have how many types of measures? Two types of measures. Two types of measures. What are the two types is? Implicit measures and explicit measures. Implicit measures, and second one is explicit measures. Explicit measures. So what are implicit measures? So measure, when you want to go with measure, for group of rows, if I need a value, I need to go with measures. So there are two types of measures, implicit measure, explicit measure. Here, this is also giving the one value for group of rows. This is also giving a one value for group of rows. For group of rows, you are showing one value in both the places. So one we call it as implicit measure, another we call it as explicit measure. Without writing the formula, if you are deriving a value, it is an implicit measure, guys. Without writing the formula, when you are getting a value for group of rows, getting a value for group of rows, we call that as implicit measure, guys. We call it as implicit measure.
Existing column.
We'll use existing columns only without writing the formula. I'm not going to write the formula. Yes, you can even add it, without writing the formula, when you are getting a value for group of rows, we call it as implicit measure. So by writing the formula, sometimes we cannot get only without writing the formula. I want some aggregate results. You will came to know in the coming classes. When I want some aggregate results, without writing the formula, you don't get it. Sometimes we need to write the formula. So look at this explicit measure. Explicit measure. By writing the formula, writing the formula, when you are getting a value for group of rows, we call it as not implicit measure, it is explicit measure. Explicit measure. Explicit. By writing the formula, if you observe here, to get this output, I written the formula. I created a measure, I written the formula. This measure we call it as explicit measure. So to get this value, to get this value, I don't written formula. I just drag them to get this value. I don't written the formula. I just drag the salary column, and it take default basic aggregation here. Basic aggregations will be there. Sum, average, minimum, maximum. It takes sum. It is implicit measure, guys. Implicit measure. There are two types of measures. Sometimes we can achieve the requirement with implicit measures itself. Without writing the formula, for a group of rows, I can derive the value. Look at this here. I want to get count of employees we have. When I want to get count of employees is nothing but for group of rows, I need one value. For group of rows, when you need a value, you need to create a measure basically, right? You need to create a measure basically. So instead of creating a measure, using implicit measures also, you can get count of employees. How to get count of employees? Just drag the employee number column, go and change the aggregation to count. Go and change the aggregation to count. How many employees we have? 15 employees we have. So without writing the formula, with this you are getting a value for group of rows, one value, we call it as implicit measure. There are some cases where we cannot get the value with implicit measures. We need to go and write explicit measure. I want to write, so I want to get sum of total salary. Sum of total salary. Total salary. When I want to get sum of total salary, what we did yesterday? To get sum of total salary, what we did yesterday?
Salary plus commission.
First we created a total salary column, and there we write salary plus commission, and then that column we used in the visual, we shown sum of total salary. You don't want to do that. For that, you don't want to create additional column. When you create additional column in the table, it will occupy more space. It will occupy more space when you create an additional column. Without even creating an additional column, you can get sum of total salary. This time, when I want to get sum of total salary, when I have a total salary column here, using implicit measure, you can get it. I have a total salary column, then with implicit measure, I can get it. So I don't have a total salary column here, but I want to get sum of total salary. All these values I need to sum. This time you want to write only explicit measure here. You need to go to data view, you need to go to the table where you need to create the measure, you need to click on new measure, and in the new measure you need to write the formula sum of total salary. If you want to get sum of total salary, you need to use function called sumx function. And in which table I need to write the expression. So in EMP table I need to write the expression, and what is the expression? Salary plus commission. So what it will do is, this formula will sum first salary and commission in the EMP table. That salary commission values it will do sum. Sumx function will sum this expression results. For each row it will do salary plus commission, and whatever the values you are getting, it will do the sum, guys. Now when I press enter, it will create a measure, and when you go and use it, it will show 41K. When I go and use sum of total salary, it will give what? 41K. So if you want to get this 41K, can we get it using implicit measure? No. You want to go and write an explicit measure. So for now, we understand that for a group of rows, when you need a value, or when you want to derive aggregate results of percentages, we need to create measures. And there are two types of measures. Sometimes some aggregate results we can get it using implicit measures itself. We don't want to write any formula. Sometimes we need to write explicit measures we need to create, we need to write formula and we need to derive it. We need to derive it. Measures are important one for a Power BI developer, guys. They will ask different new information. See, if they given a table like this, if they ask you to show sum of total salary, you want to create a measure, you need to know what functions I need to use, how to create it. Right. Now, so we know when to create a new column. So in the EMP table, for every row, when I need a value, you need to click on new column and you need to derive it. Total salary, salary plus commission, salary plus commission, press enter, salary plus commission, press enter. So for every row when I need a value, I'm deriving a new column. For group of rows when I need a value, I'm deriving a measure, guys. I'm creating a measure. Anybody have any questions? When to create a measure? What is implicit measure and explicit measure?
So repeat once again the function.
We will get it. Don't bother about what function I used here. So we are not at, starting with functions. I'm just giving a high level idea. There are some cases to achieve the requirement. We cannot get it using implicit measures. We need to go and write the formula explicitly. So we will discuss about all these functions. What are these functions? How they will work, we'll discuss in the coming classes. Someone, Raju, what is that Raju? Question, what is the question, Raju? What is the difference between measure and columns? We'll discuss it. So I'll talk difference between measure and column. I already explained it, when to create a column and when to create a measure. In more detailed way, we'll see the difference also now. We'll see a difference between them also. Any questions?
When we create measures, we involve all rows or a group of rows?
You can even apply the filter condition also. If you want, you can pass all the rows. If you want to only set of rows, you can write the filter. Maybe it use all the rows. It use all the rows, correct. What's your question? I'm not getting. It use all the rows.
Here we have used all rows, right?
Yeah, it use all the rows, correct.
Yeah, you said in the text it is only group of rows.
So you cannot call it as group of rows. Group of rows means all the rows also group of rows only, right? I'm telling for group of rows. This is one row, this is one other row. 15 rows is nothing but a group of rows. All the rows are group of rows. Same.
So in this table, if we want to create measure using first 10 rows, it is also a group of rows, right?
Wait.
So that's what I'm asking.
Just wait. When I discuss about difference between new column and measure, there you will get the picture. So why I said that group of rows means, so the same measure when I use with the department number, I'll go here. I'm using the same measure here. I'm using department number here. I'm using the same sum of salary. So when I use individually sum of salary, it is giving for all the rows sum of salary it is giving. When I use it with another department number column, for 10th department values, it is giving sum of salary. For 20th department employees, it is giving sum of salary. 30th department employees, it is giving sum of salary. 50th department employees, it is giving sum of salary. When you create any measure, when you use with any dimension column, for group of rows, it will give the value. So when you individually use it, for all the group of rows, it will give one value. When you drag it with any dimension column, for that dimension value, it will give the sum of sales. You will get it. Just wait for a few minutes.
Measures will not occupy.
I'll discuss that point also here. Let's talk about difference between new column and measures, columns and measures. Difference between columns and measures So what is the difference between columns and measures? Let's talk about it. It's important. Fine. So
what is the difference?
Difference?
What is the difference between quick measure and new measure?
I'll discuss it. At the end of the DAX, I'll discuss what is quick measure. You'll understand.
Okay.
when to go with quick measure, when to go with normal measure, we'll discuss.
Okay.
But Sunil, when we create explicit measures, the column will not be added, right? Only it
Wait,
will show
man,
in
just give me some time. Just give me some time. Everyone's
Okay.
question will be answered now. Everyone's questions will be answered now here. Just wait. So unnecessarily I given time for the questions. Once after this, if I ask that, if I give the time, no one will ask that questions. Fine, let me continue now. Difference between columns and measures. So now for this to explain this, I have a Word document readily available here. I'll open that Word document and I'll explain it. So introduction to DAX. In there, I recorded what is the difference between new column and new measure, or column and measures. So what is the difference is, so we know when to create. First point is when to create the new column. For every row, for each row, when you need a value, we need to create a new column. When to create a measure, to calculate aggregates and percentages, we need to create a measure. Or for group of rows, if you need a value, if you need one value, we need to create a measure. For group of rows, when you need a value, we need to create a measure. So first point is when to create the column, when to create the measure. Okay. Now let's talk about the second point. When you create any new column, how the values will be calculated. When I create a new column, values are calculated based on information for each row of a table. So when I create any new column, here I created a total salary column, guys. When I create a new column, the values will be calculated based on each row. It will take first row. In the first row, it will take salary, it will take commission, it will sum them, and it will show the result. Like this, once it is done with first row, it will go to the second row, it will take the salary, it will take the commission, it will sum them. Then it will go to third row, it will take the salary, commission, it will sum them, it will show. So new column will be calculated based on information of each row. For that row, what values you have, that values it will do sum and you'll get it. You will get it, right? So when to create a measure? When you create a new column, the values will calculate based on each row. How the measure values will calculate? So when you create a measure, the measure values will calculate based on the information from any filter in the report or the field used in the visualization. So it is row context, guys. When it is calculating a value for every row, we call it as row context. Now when I create a measure, how the measure value will be calculated? I created one measure here. Let me add a new page here. I created one measure here and the measure name is sum of salary. How this measure value will calculate is, when I drag that measure to the visual, I am independently dragging the sum of salary. When you independently drag the sum of salary, you'll get sum of salary here. What it will do is, it will sum all the rows in that column and it will give the value 39K it is giving. So when you independently drag it, it will sum for all the rows. So, and even this measure value will change based on the filters, guys. Filters you apply. Take an example. I have measure value here. I have a slicer here where I can filter the data. And when I drag the job here, when I go and click on analyst, slicers are used for filtering the data. Basically, the slicer visuals are used for filtering the data. When I click on analyst, it will give sum of salary for only analyst. When I click on clerk, it will give sum of salary for only clerk. When I click on analyst, it is showing sum of salary as 6,000. What is happening? So what it will do is, in the job, it will filter analyst. For the analyst, 2 employees are there. When you sum the salaries, it will give what? 6,000. The measure values will change when you change the filter conditions. When you change the filter conditions, for managers, I'm paying 8,275 salary. For trainers, I'm paying 10,000 salary. How many trainers are there? I have only one trainer. What is the salary we are paying? 10,000, sum of salary. So like this, when you select the measure value, when you drag measure independently, it will show complete value. When you filter the data based on the filter condition, the measure value will change. Not only that, the measure value will calculate based on the dimension column also. I am dragging department number column. When you drag the department number column, it will show how many different departments you have, 10, 20, 30 and 50. And it is showing each department number. The same measure which I used here, I'll drag it here now. I'll drag it here. When I drag the same measure here, it is showing different values. When you create any measure, it will not hold any data, guys. In the measure, it will hold only formula. Measure will just hold the formula. Measure will not hold any data. When you drag that measure independently, it will calculate sum of salary for all the rows. When you drag it with a dimension column, it will calculate sum of salary for 10th department employees. For group of rows, it will filter 10th department rows. For 10th department, sum of salary it will give. It will filter 20th department rows, it will give sum of salary. It will filter 30th department rows, it will give sum of salary. It will filter 50th department rows, it will give sum of salary. Look at this 10th department, it is telling 8750. Go and see here. It will filter 10th department and it will do sum of salary for 10th department. 1300 plus 500, 6300, 6300 plus 2450, 8750. That is what we are showing. 10th department, we are paying a sum of salary of 8750. 750. So when you drag any measure with a dimension column, at that dimension value level, it will calculate the sum of salary. When you independently drag it for all the rows, it will calculate the sum of salary. When you create any measure, measure will not hold the data. Measure will just hold the formula what you written. When you drag that formula to the visual, so based on the dimension column you have there, it will execute. If you don't have any dimension column, it will give complete value. When you have any dimension column, at that dimension value level, it will give the data. That is what I mentioned here. When you create a measure, measure values are calculated based on information from any filter. When you change the filter, the measure value will change. Any filters in the report, the measure value will change. Or the fields used in the visualization, the measure value will calculate based on the column we used in the visual. Let's take an example. I'm creating another visual where I'm showing job wise sales. Each job, first I'll drag job column. When I drag job column, when I drag the sum of salary will calculate this time based on job column. Analyst, what is the sum of salary? Clerks, what is the sum of salary? Managers, what is the sum of salary it will give? So based on the dimension values, it will give it. So even when you add another dimension column in this visual, I can go and add one more dimension column called job. When I add one more dimension column, 10th department clerks, what is the sum of salary? 20th department analyst, what is the sum of salary? 30th department salesmen, what is the sum of salary? In 30th departments, how many salesmen are there? What is their sum of salary? This measure will calculate based on the dimension columns we have in the visual. So measure, when you create any measure, so people will think that this will hold a value called 39K all the time. Measure will not hold any data. When you create a measure, measure will hold the formula. That formula will execute when you drag on top of the visual. When you drag it here, it will execute on all the data. When you drag it here, it will execute on this combination data. When you drag it here, it will execute on this combination data. So when you drag salary, sum of salary here, it will execute for analyst. When you drag sum of salary here, it will execute for department number and job, guys. Department number and job. 10th department, how many managers? Look at this. 30th department, how many salesmen we have? Let's see. So when I go to 30th department, how many salesmen I have? I will filter here and salesmen. So when I sum their salaries, it is telling that 5,600. 1250, 1250, 2,500, 2,500 and 1,500, 4,000, 4,000 plus 1,600, 5,600. For this combination, 30th department salesmen, what is the sum of salary? 5,600. Is it the what we are seeing here? 30th department salesman, sum of salary is 5,600. When you create any measure, the measure will calculate based on the dimension columns in the visual or based on the filters we selected in the visual, guys. Fine. So when you create a new column, it will append the
Sir?
yes. Yes.
See, whenever we are writing that measure function, that time only the data is changing, or the implicit measures also it will be happening.
Implicit also it will change. Implicit also it will change. Not only formula. See, if you even see, when I have a salary column, when I just drag the salary column independently, it will give a different value. When I drag the salary column independently, it is giving 39K. The same salary column I will drag with job. This time I will drag the job, I will drag the salary column. It will even change. Both will work in the same way.
Thank you.
Right. Now, so when you create a new column, it will add a new column in the table. Whenever you create a new column, so when you load the EMP table, you have only 8 columns. When you create any new column, it will add one 9th column in the table. It will add one 9th column in the table. For every row, it will populate the data. So when it add a new column in the table, it will occupy the space. It is adding the column, it is populating the data, it will occupy some space. When you have a table with 10 million rows, when you create a new column, you will get 10 million values in the output column. It will occupy some space. So that is what we mentioned here. When you create a new column, it will append static values to each row in the table and stores them in the Power Pivot model, which will increase our Power Pivot model size. Power Pivot model size. How many new columns are creating? Based on that new columns, your file size will goes on increasing. When you create a new measure does not create new data in the tables, which does not increase the file size. I said that when you create a measure, the measure will not store any data. Measure will just store the formula. To store the formula, it will not even occupy 0.01 KB of space. It will not hold any data. So you look at this. I created a measure called sum of sales. Will it is creating any columns here? Will it is giving any additional data? No, it will just store one formula. When you use that formula when you use that one in the visual and you drag it on the visual, that time it will execute and it will give the output. Measures will execute at the runtime. When you create the new column, at the time of creating the new column, it will execute, it will give the data. At the time of creating the new columns, it will execute and it will give the data. But when you create any measures, at the time of creating the measures, it will just store the formula. When the measure will execute, measures will execute when I drag the formula to the visuals. I'm creating one visual, I'm dragging this formula to the visual. Once you drop that formula here, that time it will execute. Measures will execute in the runtime, it will give the data. Right. So when the new column values will recalculate again. So you created a new column. At the time of calculating, it will calculate the values. And then when this values will recalculate again. When these values will recalculate again is when you click on refresh the data. When I click on refresh, what happens is it will truncate and reload the data. In the EMP table, whatever the data you have in the EMP table, it will truncate all the data and it will reload the data into the EMP table. In EMP table, it will remove all the data. It will reload the data from the source. Every time when you click on refresh, it will truncate and reload the data into the tables. When it reload the data into the tables and this additional columns which we created, they will recalculate again. When you refresh the data sources, when you refresh the data, the new columns will recalculate. When you refresh it, every table it will delete the data and reload the data. When it reload the data for every new columns what you created here, they will recalculate it again. Not only that. So those will be recalculated when you make changes to the source columns. I have some source columns. To create this total salary, I use salary column and commission column. When I make any changes to my source column, this will recalculate again. So new column values will recalculate on data source refresh or when changes are made to the component columns which are used to derive the calculated column. New column also call it as calculated column. Some people will call new column as calculated column. So to write the formula for calculated column, whatever the source columns you used, if the data is changing in the source columns, automatically the target column will change. The new column which you derived using the source columns will change, right? recalculates on data source refresh, or when we change the data in the component columns, source columns. And when the measure value will recalculate. Measure value will recalculate in response to any changes to the filters within the report. When you make any changes in the filters, when you change any filter value, when I change any filter value, the measure value will recalculate. Whenever we need to, when change any filter value, the measure value will recalculate. So when I select clerk here, for clerk it is showing sum of salary. The measure value will recalculate when we make changes to the filters, or when we add or remove another dimension column to the visual. So when we add a new dimension column here, see, look at this. When I have only department number, the values it is showing is something different. So when I add a department number, it is showing department wise sum of salary. And when this measure, so when with the department number it is calculating, it is showing measure value. So when it will recalculate again, when you go and add additional dimension column here, I'm adding job column here, it is recalculating again and it is giving the new values. It is recalculating again, it is giving the new values here. When you, just one second.
No voice, sir.
Correct. Sorry guys. So here the measure value will recalculate when you change the filters, or when you add the new dimension columns, or when you remove the dimension columns, the measure value will recalculate. The measure value will recalculate. And the new column name should be unique at the table level, guys. So new column name will be unique at the table level, and measure name should be unique throughout the model. The meaning is, so I'm going and creating a new column called ABC. In EMP table, I'm creating a new column called ABC. In the same EMP table, can I create another column with the same ABC? Means no. In the EMP table already I have a column called total salary. In the same table, same EMP table, can I create another column with the same name? Same name. So some dummy value I'm keeping here, 1. So 1, it will not allow. The new column name should be unique at the table level. When you use one name for one column, you are not supposed to give the same name for another column. You need to give another name here. Another name here. I want to go and add 1 or something here. I want to go and add salary, total salary 1 or something here. Then it will create. So can I give the same total salary name in the DEPT table? In the DEPT table, I can go and create a new column. Can I give the same name, total sal? Yes, it will allow. It will allow. So new column name should be unique only at the table level. In the table, if you use that name for one column, you cannot create with the same name another column. You can go and create another, in another table, you can create a column with the same name. It is possible. Right, this total salary given in DEPT table, it allowed. Even in the EMP table, I have the same column name. It will allow, no problem. In different tables, you can have a column with the same name. Different tables, you can have a column with the same name. But when I create a measure in one table, in EMP table, I created one measure with the name sum of salary. The same measure I'll give in DEPT table. Let's go to the DEPT table. Let me create a new measure, and let me give the measure name as sum of salary. Sum of salary. And can I go and create it? Means it will give a message no. So you are creating a measure in the DEPT table with the name sum of salary. The sum of salary is already used for a measure in the EMP table. Even though in the EMP table I use that measure, I cannot even create in DEPT table with same name. The measure name should be unique throughout the model. The measure name should be unique throughout the model. Model means in all the tables. If you use one measure name, you cannot use that measure name for any other measure in any other table. These are the difference between new column and new measure. Any questions now?
That means throughout the project for that data set.
Yeah, complete data set level. Complete data set level, the measure name should be unique.
I have a question. Suppose I have created, I already have an employee table, total column like total sum of total salary. If I am creating the measure with the same name, will it allow?
Sorry.
Suppose in my
Column,
employee,
you have a column, you are telling. You have a column already. You are telling, right?
yeah, I already have a column like sum of salary. So if I am creating a measure with the same name, will it allow? Or?
It will allow. It will allow. It is not about column, right? It is about measure, right? So let's go to the EMP table. Instead of salary, let's rename that column to sum of salary. The salary column, let me rename it to sum of salary. Sum of salary. Take an example. For some reasons, this column name is sum of salary. Sum of salary. So if what happened is already used for a measure, even it is not allowing, the name sum of salary is already used for measure on a table EMP. We'll do one thing. First, let me delete this, or else we'll do one thing. Keep the salary column as it is. I'll create one measure here with same name. I'll go and create a measure with the name sal. I'll create a measure with the name sal. Whatever the column name I have, same name I'm giving here. I'm giving one hard-coded value. It is not allowing. The name salary is already used for a column on a table EMP. Choose a different name. Even if you have a column already with the name, it is not allowing to create a measure with the same name. It is not allowing.
Okay. So you meant to say, like, while we are creating any measure, we need to be, the name has to be different from the any of the table
Any of
column.
the columns, table columns, or any of the measures we already have in any table.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, hello, Sunil.
Hmm.
Yeah, implicit measures and explicit measures both are result is same only, but
Result is same.
performance wise, is explicit measure
Both are
will be
same.
the
No, both will
performance.
same. Performance wise also both will be same.
But when we will use measurement,
When you are able to get the requirement with implicit measures, use implicit measures only. I said that. I given a table to you like this. I want sum of total salary. Can you get it using implicit measure? You want to create an explicit measure. Performance point of view, both are same. In the back end, the formula it is going to execute is same. There is no difference.
yeah, thank you.
So one more question. Sir, if we are fetching the data from the cloud, in that case, this data view will be not there, no?
When it is direct query, not cloud, not import. It is not related to cloud, it is not related to import. It is related to connectivity mode. If you go with the direct query, data view will not be available. Yes, correct.
In that
So
case,
even though, if you even doesn't have data view, but you can find an option called measure. So let me open a new report here, Power BI desktop. Even I'll connect to SQL Server in the direct query mode now. In the new report, I'll connect to SQL Server in the direct query mode. Even you don't find data view. I explained about a generic process that you need to go to data view, you need to select the table, and you need to go to the table tools, you need to do it. Even without going here, you can even create it. Let's assume I want to create a measure, or I want to create a new measure in the EMP table. When I want to create a measure in the EMP table, I can select EMP table. I can even see the new measure here. It is not that only you can see when you go to the data view. I'm not in the data view now currently. I'm where? I'm just selecting the table. I'm still seeing the table tools. I can create a measure. But the best practice is go to the data view and create it. Even when you are not in the data view, you can see them. You can create them. Is it the question or something else you are asking about?
here we cannot see, means on what value we are writing and all we cannot see, no? How we can write formulas now.
Where what value you cannot see?
So if suppose you are writing in
Direct query mode here.
That some function is not reflecting the table, no, sir. Whenever you were writing that one.
yeah, yes.
Some X function you were writing that, no?
Sorry, I'm not supposed to. I will go with direct query. What is the question? I don't understand here. I am connecting to the tables in the direct query mode. So you can see the tables here, which we loaded into the Power Pivot. We can do the data modeling as usual. We can do the data modeling as usual, but the tables are direct query mode. So I can even create a measure here. I want to get sum of salaries. There is a sales amount column. I want to sum them. I want to show it. I can select this. I can click on new measure. When I click on new measure, what I need? Sum of sales amount I need. Sum of sales amount. I can write some formula here. I can take some function. I can pass sales amount column. What you will not see here. So when I drag this measure, it will give sum of sales amount. This query will fight to database. It will not fight to Power Pivot. It will fight to database. Why it will fight to database? In Power Pivot, you just have table definitions. You don't have data. This query will fight to database. It will bring the data. What is the question here?
Okay, so thank you. No, actually what I want to say that details will not find here like that.
Fine. Any other questions? Fine, guys. So we are done with some introduction about DAX. This yesterday's and today's class is all about introduction only, but introduction is important. So from now, what you need to learn as part of DAX is all about functions and operators. So you need to learn what are the different operators we have in the DAX, and when to use which operator, how to use the operator, and what are the different functions we have in the DAX, when to use the functions and how to use the functions you need to learn. So if you can learn what are the operators we have, what are the functions you have, so you can write whatever the information client is asking to show, we can derive them and we can show them. Right? I'll stop here. We'll continue from here in tomorrow's class. Let me publish this notes to Power Based Service.
In direct query mode also, when we are deriving new column, it will occupy only formula only, no? It will hold the formula and it will run, will execute.
So when you create new column at the runtime, it will execute every time.
In direct query mode.